Hello, hello, welcome to Brew from the Bothy number 26. My name is Fay. Welcome, welcome. Lovely, hope you've got a brew and you're ready to come and sit for me. Sit for me? You're not going to sit for me. Sit with me for about half an hour while I chat all things crochet and knitting, yarn festivals, and yarn. I bought yarn. I couldn't help myself, it was too nice and I fell hard at a stand at Unravel. Let's dig in and let me start telling you what I've been up to the last 2 weeks. We're going to start with what I'm wearing. You've seen this before, but it's a firm favourite. It's really chilly and overcast here today. And this is my Astrid sweater by Knitting for Olive. It's holding up really well. It's in John Arbon Textiles Exmoor sock in the colourway Mizzle. If it's not Mizzle, it's Drizzle. I can never remember which, and I'm not going to look it up. And I really love it. I've got it as a kind of a crop length. It's longer at the back than it is at the front, and it's warm. The Exmoor sock yarn is really lovely and warm. And like I say, it's holding up well. It gets worn quite a lot, and it isn't really like matting a lot under the underarms at my oxters, so I'm pretty pleased with it. Right, moving on from there, let me show you what I've been crocheting this last 2 weeks. I've finished the 2 cowls that I was working on. The first one it's so retro, the colours, I love it. This is my Metro cowl. This is the design that is in issue 185 of Inside Crochet. And it's got one full rotation twist on it as you mattress stitch the 2 ends together. It's crocheted as a big tube, so it's kind of double thickness, which makes it even warmer. Marcus was wearing this on Friday at Unravel on the Rivenet stand. And when I saw him later in the afternoon, he said, "Can I take it off now?" Because it was very warm to be wearing in a festival. So I let him take it off. This is a 3-colour version, and the 3 colours are this beautiful tealy blue is Ocean Vela, the green is Mousse Bedector, and the orange is called Rost. So this used up almost all 300 grams. You could, if you had some scraps, make it smaller and not put the twist in it, because the twist actually takes up quite a bit of the circumference of the tube. So you could just have a much tighter, closer cowl if you wanted. But really lovely and warm. It also could be a scrappy version. I started one the other day and I've ripped it out already because scrappiness is not my thing. So I couldn't quite cope with it, so I've ripped it out and I will come at it again, maybe make a smaller version but make the colours a little more planned, I think. So this was off my hooks. It is truly really lovely and warm, and what I wanted to show you, if I can even find it, in this pattern you mattress stitch together, there we go, you mattress stitch together the 2 sides. But the way that I've written the pattern is that you start halfway through this repeat and you keep on going, and then you finish up halfway through the other repeat. And when you do your full rotation to get this twist into it, you match up the stitches, and then you really, you would not know that is where the tube has been joined in half down that. I'll give you a bit of a close up. I mean, if you really look at it, you can see a little bit, but you'd have to really look at it. So you get this lovely continuous loop, and you don't have any really visible, obvious join going on with it. If you've never tried mattress stitch with crochet, quite often it's something I think is more associated with knitting. Give it a go. I did some trials where I joined together crocheted squares, and I tried whip stitch, zigzag stitch and mattress stitch, and by far my recommendation is to just use mattress stitch. So I'll link you out to those blog posts and videos if you want to know how I mattress stitch my crochet together, because this is kind of finished that you can get with it, like pretty seamless. particularly if what you're doing is using the same coloured yarn as you've got in the pattern. Throughout all of this I've used the blue, so even where the green and the orange come together, you really can't see the mattress stitch in there. Kind of it all zips up and you just get this lovely, beautiful, nicely tensioned join. So my Metro Cowl is done. It really looks, I've had a couple of people tell me that because of the slight semi-solid nature of the green and the orange in particular, that it's got a kind of velvet look to the fabric, and I couldn't agree more. With these colours, with the semi-solid nature, it really gets across that feeling of moquette fabric that you used to get on, and still do, on bus seats and the tube seats. It really makes it look like it's that type of fabric, which makes me happy to no end. So Metro Cowl is done. That can pop over there. And then the other thing that I finished, love, is my Halo Cowl. Oh, it's all things magpie and starling and ravens, and I love it. Like, I have got ravens here, there's one over here. I love the darkness of certain animals, and also barn owls, which are everywhere. So this really shouts magpie, ravens and starlings to me. It's really beautiful. So this took almost the full 100 grams of the variegated yarn, which is Best in Show by Rivernets. It's in the DK, as is the Metro Cowl. And then it took just under 50 grams of the semi-solid colour that I've used in between. So basically you've got 3 rows in the variegated, 1 row in the semi-solid, so just under 50. And then I think it used about 40 to 45 grams of the Gepard mohair that I was holding double, but that is used all the way up through, so you do use a little bit of that. But if you had scraps lying around, if you've got a bit of a solid DK left, and you can match it up with, maybe you've got a special skein, as most of us do, special variegated skein of DK, as long as you get a nice mohair that will run right the way through with it and work with both colours, you can get this sort of effect with it and really tone down. And I think last time I called it saddening. It's like when you do natural dyeing and you add iron to it, it saddens off the colour a little bit, and that's what the mohair has done in this. I really love it. So you could make it smaller again. I've done this as a big cowl because I just, like, the snuggle factor is immense with this. So I just wanted to use the full 100 grams of the variegated skein, but there's no reason why you couldn't make it smaller or keep it larger, double it in for a really cozy cowl. Yeah, I'm really happy with this, and this is in the current issue of Inside Crochet, and that is issue number 186, and it's called the Halo Cowl. So that got finished too, and I've hurried along with both of these because I get the rights back fairly shortly, and I want to get the patterns written up. It'll be very timely, like get the rights back, get my version of the pattern out, which is not what always happens. Sometimes it can be years in the making before I actually republish something that's been in a publication. So I'm trying to be a little bit more on it this year. So by doing those samples, hopefully I'm there. Can you see all the fluff that's flying around now? That's one because of those things I've just shown you, but also I've finally hoovered and tidied up my office this morning because it's getting a little bit grim. So now that I've finished 2 things, crochet-wise, I wanted to show you what I'm thinking I'm going to make next. I think I've shown you this big printout before. It's a book of crocheted socks, and it's by Jeanette at Air Crochet, and she's just got some beautiful pairs in this book. I got it as a download. I think you can get it as an actual book, but I think it might just be in Danish. I've certainly never found it in English, but it's absolutely full of gorgeous crochet sock patterns and really quite varied. it's difficult for me to show you them all because it's basically on A4 sheets. Let's see if this is one of the pairs I was thinking about doing, kind of little ankle socks with a nice little droplet over the cuff. They're called the pearl socks, or let's not mix up all my pages. I really like the ones on the front, which I think are called the mosaic socks. So basically I'm going to pick a pair and start to make them based on whether they are toe up, toe down, toe up or cuff down. I have a massive preference for cuff down. I'm not a big fan of toe up socks, and it's not that the structure doesn't work as well. I just massively prefer making cuff down. That's what I learned. I've tried doing toe up, didn't enjoy it, so I just stick to cuff down all the time now. So I don't know which of the many beautiful pairs that are in this book that I'm going to make next, but I like them, I love them. Let me show you them because they're so freaking cool. These are called the Braided socks. Look at them. They're just so cool. Now, some of the yarns that she calls for in this book are things like Filcolana or Weta, which is a really good sock yarn. And it's not dissimilar to the Lang Yowl that I showed you last time round. I do also have Filcolana or Weta in my sock stash. So I'm going to find the pattern and then match the yarn to it out of my many, many hanks skeins of sock. But like I said last time, I'm definitely going to look for something which is ever so slightly thinner, so more like 210 for 50 grams or 425 meters for 100 grams, because it makes crocheted socks easier to wear, nicer to wear on the balls of your feet because you've got much thicker stitches. So I'm looking forward to get my hooks into them. But one of the things I know from crocheted socks, because I've got a natural muscle memory for how many stitches I need for a stocking stitch knitted sock, I don't have that for a crocheted sock. So I'm going to have to swatch this to make sure I'm getting the right gauge and to make sure that it will get over the basically my heel at the widest point goes from the diagonal that you need to cover. So there's no point in me just forging ahead and quickly crocheting any of these pairs of socks. I really have to swatch to make sure that I can get gauge and make something that is fit for purpose and the right size. If it was a knitted sock, I wouldn't need to do that because I know how many stitches I need for my foot. So there's a bit more work involved in doing this, but if I get it right at the end, I'll have a beautiful pair of crocheted socks that are really lovely and warm, I have to say. I've got some pairs of bigger boots that I can wear thicker socks in, and so I can wear crocheted socks in them quite happily. But also, I always have handmade socks on, so even when I'm around the house, so it's no issue for me to have some socks that I maybe don't wear in boots as well. So that is coming to my hooks. I was going to say maybe tonight, but not tonight. I need a breather. Right, let's see what is on my needles. Basically, when I say what's on my needles and I'm talking about stuff, I'm also going to introduce you to some of the yarns that have come to be in my ownership over the last week. I went down to London it was my Christmas present from my best friend. She was coming as well, and we were doing a natural beauty workshop where we got to make a cleanser and a face mask all made out of natural ingredients. So while we were down there and I collected her from Victoria Station, I realised how close I was to Beautiful Knitters in London, which for my money is the nicest yarn shop in London. It's the one that I will always try and make an effort to go to because I really like it. It's not a huge shop, but it's nicely laid out with a great range of yarns in a good range of prices as well, covering most budgets, but definitely with a preference for wool over acrylic, but they carry quite a lot of cotton as well. So one of the reasons I was keen to go is because I had stalked their website and seen that they had Gepard CashSock. Now, last time round I said how much I loved the Gepard mohair, and so I wanted to try some other Gepard yarns, and this one is a mix of 70% merino, which is non-superwash, really important, 20% polyamide and 10% cashmere. Now, I don't think I personally have got any handmade socks with cashmere in them, but Matthew does, and he really likes them, and I just put them out to dry today because I did a wool wash, and you can feel the difference even that little 10% of cashmere makes. There's just a softness and a plumpness to them, and I have a lot of cashmere that I find in charity shops at great prices. So I know that cashmere is one of my favourite fibres for keeping me warm, and so I wanted to try and make myself some socks with a braided cashmere in it. But the other reason I was drawn to it is the price point. This was only £16.60, which for a cashmere sock is really affordable. If you buy an indie dyed cash nylon sock, you're looking more like £23 to £28 for a skein. So £16.60 for a very similar fibre content and non-superwash is actually a really good price for this yarn. So I bought two. They didn't have a massive range of colours, but I got two that were complementary. So this dark stormy grey blue colour is already been knitted up into a pair of vanilla socks for Matthew. I gave him the choice of either colour, and he wanted this colour, which I suspect will go nicely with his jeans, or when he's going into work he'll pop these on. And between these two skeins I will manage to get 3 pairs of socks out of them. He and I have got very similar sized feet. For me, I do a 60 stitch sock, vanilla sock, and for Matthew I do a 64 stitch vanilla sock, and his foot length is maybe half a centimetre longer than mine, so I know that I will easily get 3 pairs of socks out of these two skeins. I'm really enjoying working with it as well. It's not splitty. It does feel slightly more luxurious. There's no brittleness or crunch to it at all. It's really nice. So I'm enjoying working on that. I wasn't entirely meant to cast on a new pair of socks, but I'm doing quite a lot of online training at the moment for various bits and pieces, and it's just really handy to have a sock on the go for something like that, where I can still take in the information but do something with my hands. The idea of sitting doing one thing, I can't. So this allows me to not have idle hands, still be moving something forward, but it's not as big as working on a jumper where I would maybe not get around a full round when I finished part of the training, whereas it's always easy to finish off on the end of a round of a sock. So I find it really helpful to sometimes just have a vanilla sock on the go. So 1 pair in the making for Matthew, and then I will make a pair in this, and then we'll see who gets the 3rd pair and whether they'll be striped or how we get on with them, who gets what, whether it's just contrast toes, heels, or maybe like a little odd pair. That would do it as well. So also on my needles. And then the other thing that I have done is made some progress on my reworked jumper that I'm on. And I'm pretty sure I showed you this last time. It's the one that I tinked back at Christmas time, and I have just been working on getting the length back into it. Now you can see there's a very obvious stripe here where I picked up and cut back and then started knitting again. I'm not at all concerned about this stripe. It's not a different yarn, it's just a very slight not even puckering, but basically where I've put the needle in to be able to pick up the stitches to be able to pull it back, you've gone from a stitch that is very settled and flattened, and I've shoved a needle back into it, so it's just meant that it's raised up a little bit. But when I wash and block this, that will all settle out and you won't know that there's that big line down there at all, because we're just going from up here yarn that has been knitted into a fabric, washed and worn, to yarn that is only just being knitted into a fabric, so it hasn't settled. So that's what that difference is basically. So I've got a bit more to put into this. I don't really see how far I got onto it last night. Yeah, maybe got a couple more inches before I get onto the rib of it, and I know that I am now making this into a jumper that I am going to want to wear, so that feels good. One of the things though I wanted to talk to you around is what I did with the yarn, because I think last time I was just going to go and wash the yarn. I did, but I've actually got a top tip for you, because I washed it in the skein, which is what I would suggest you do. And then when I was hanging the skein, I did a lark's knot, which is basically when you, what can I show you with? When you double over the end and you put one end through the doubled bit. This makes no sense, but it means that you can hang it without putting a hook through it or anything like that. I hung it on our old clothes horse, and then what I did was spread out the bottom of the skein so it was there was even tension across the skein, and I popped a tin of tomatoes inside of it, so the tomatoes were literally being cradled at the bottom of the skein. The tomatoes were enough weight that it meant that it was pulling down on the skein, and as it was drying it was taking the remainder of the kink out of the yarn. That was the kink that had been there because it had been a knitted yarn basically. So top tip, if you are washing yarn that you want to reuse and you are, I can't think of a better way of putting it, dekinking it. If you're dekinking your yarn by washing and drying it, basically use a lark's knot, get your yarn hung on something, and then use a tin of tomatoes and spread the strands of the skein out along the length of the tomato can. And that should mean that you've got enough tension across the whole of your skein that every single strand of that skein is under tension and it's pulling the final bits of kink out of that yarn. If you wanted to, if you really felt you needed to, you could probably stack 2 tins of tomatoes on it, but I found that 1 tin was like the right way and it worked really well. And let me show you. So I did some swatches for you so you could see. Yeah, this is the Kinky yarn that I didn't wash before I knitted it, and I knitted it and then I blocked it afterwards. I'm not sure how well this is going to show on the screen, but I have created a blog post for you so that you can see it in the blog post. You can still see, even though it has been blocked, the fabric is actually still really quite uneven. And what I can see, because I'm looking through to daylight, is I've got some bigger holes through some of the stocking stitches. It just isn't as even as it could be. The fabric hasn't flattened out, hasn't evened out as much as I would like it to. And when I compare that to the swatch where I had washed and completely dekinked the yarn, and you can still see there's a difference in the threads. So here on my left, you can see that it's still little kinks going in the thread, and the bit on my right does not, and that fabric is just much neater than the one that didn't get washed out properly. So I wanted to just test it because I'm all for saving time. If I don't have to do part of a method to get to the same result at the end, then I would love to know that I don't need to do that thing. However, you do need to dekink yarn. I think particularly if it's been knitted and particularly if it's a 4-ply yarn, because you most likely done it on smaller needles, so you've got more kink in that yarn. I would also apply the same thing into crochet, but you can kind of get away with it a little bit more in crochet, simply because the nature of the stitches that you are making are more involved and have got more steps for them, so there's probably more places that the kinks are going to be pulled out and hidden. But if you want to be absolutely on the safe side, then wash and put your yarn under tension as you dry it to get all the kinks out, because it does make a difference. This one is the nice one, this one is not, it's just a lot more uneven. Full blog post, I'll link to it down below if you want to see exactly what I did step by step with photos. You can have a look, but yeah, washing yarn I think is essential. So I will continue working away on my Goldenfern sweater. It's by Jennifer Steingass, and the main colour is called Blackthorn, and it's Harvest Hues by John Arbon Textiles. This is a really easy colour for me to wear. It goes with the blue of my eyes. Looking forward to having this back in my wardrobe, and I think I've got another jumper that I'm going to frog back because I'm not wearing it because of the neckline. And I think I'm going to frog back that, so all the more reason for having tested this and knowing the treatment that I need to take for this next frogged project. Right, let me get rid of this. So let's discuss next on my needles, which is also going to shimmy into incoming yarn because the two are related. I got my hands on a book which has got a pattern in it which I have coveted. Sorry, I've got something in my eyeball again. Like I said, there's so much dust. This is a pattern that I have coveted for maybe 12 years now. I didn't realise that she had actually released it as a single pattern. I always thought it was just in this book, and I can remember exactly when and where I saw this pattern, and I fell in love with it and spoke to the designer about it, but I didn't want to buy the whole book. Now, it is called The Rock Hopper Shawl, and it's by Anna Maltz, and it's the most gorgeous graphic shawl. I saw it at Yarndale in probably 2015, and I might have been 2014. I absolutely fell in love with this shawl, and I finally found a copy on Vinted for £3 and thought, you're mine, you need to be mine. There are other patterns in there that I might like I know a little boy that would love a pair of penguin mittens, so I might make more things out of this book, and if all I make is the shawl, then that's fine, because then I'll resell the book on Vinted. So I want to make the Rock Hopper shawl, but I don't want to do it in these very graphic colours, because I just, as striking as they are, they're just not my colours, and it's not it's almost too graphic for something that I would wear. So instead what I did was bought some yarn at Unravel. I travelled down to Unravel Yarn Festival on Friday, and I wasn't looking for yarn for this jumper, but I came across it. As I was driving down, I had a thought, which was, what if a yarn dyer just did a really pared back palette, but just offered those limited colours across their different bases, because different fibres take dye in a different way, so you get subtle colour changes anyway. But wouldn't that be an interesting notion to see how that would work across different bases, and to just have that beautiful limited palette? And then when I got into Unravel, I went up to see Becky and Marcus at River Knits, and diagonally across from them was a dyer called Loom. And that is exactly what she had done at Loom. Just taken a really pared back palette and applied it across all the dye bases. So I picked up 3 almost like heritage colours, I think. It reminds me a little bit of kind of William Morris Arts and Crafts colours, and I'm going to make my rock hopper out of these 3 colours. I think that I'm going to use the contrast of the light pink and the green. The green is called Murmuration, which I love. Like it's the perfect name for that colour. And then the light pink is called Dirty Blossom. It's got ever such a little bit of a hand-dyed speckle in it, which probably isn't coming across in the camera. Maybe you can see there's the tiniest little blip of yellow in there. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that translates. So those two will be the graphic stripes. And then I'm going to use the brownie maroon, which is called Rose Brown, as the very top, which is the yellow in the rock hopper. Now the rock hopper is in lace weight, but it uses quite a large needle size. So my thought is, and I know that other people have done projects where they've made it out of 4-ply, so my thought is I can probably still get a decent sized shawl out of all of these colours. I'm going to provide a link to Loom. She was lovely. I want to say she was called Jess, but that might be wrong. She was really lovely. Her stand was beautiful. All in wood, pared back little dried flowers, like very, very much my vibe. I was completely drawn to it. And just that pared back palette was actually like a bit of a breath of fresh air. There's so much colour and vibrancy at Unravel from all of the other yarn dyers that her stand was almost like a little bit of an oasis, because it felt really calm and just inviting to me. Probably it really wouldn't have been everyone's cup of tea, but I thought it was beautiful. It was also very busy, so it was a lot of people's cup of tea. So I'm really looking forward to getting my needles into a pared back heritage rock hopper. It will by no means look like a penguin, but it will be my version of a penguin. I really want to wear. Look at those colours. I love them. Love, love, love. So did not intend to buy yarn for that. Probably could have shopped my stash. Definitely could have shopped my stash. But I've just worked so hard for the last few months. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm here. I'm loving what they're doing. I want to support indie businesses. I'm going to buy a shawl quantity and I'm going to wear that shawl. So I didn't just buy that from them. I went back twice. I also got, and just to prove my point about what I was saying about using one colour and showing how differently it shows up on different bases. So the one that I bought for the shawl is, I think she called it Crochet Sock, and it is 100% Crochet non-superwash. Standard 4-ply at 400 metres per 100 grams. This is the same colour. Look at the state of that skein. I pulled it out and I'm rubbish at reskeining. Maybe it's not good. But this is the same colour. This is also Murmuration, but this is on, I think it's 90%. 50% baby alpaca, 25% linen, 25% silk. Same colour, same dye concept, but very different because of the fibre base on it. You just have got a lot more of the strands of the silk and the linen that don't take the dye in the same way. But that was exactly what I was dreaming about as I was driving down to Unravel. So it was really interesting to see it live when I got into the festival. So I also got that. This is an old pattern that I'm going to rework in a linen, because quite a lot of the indie dyers are using this sort of a merino linen or merino linen silk base at the moment. So it should have really good drape to it, and I've got a couple of patterns that I can show this off nicely that are one skein patterns. So I bought that. But I also fell really deeply. She had a mini skein bundle. Oh my word. Like, that to me is like old rose garden that is falling into autumn and the petals are starting to dry out. I could not pass up this little bundle. This is going to be a pair of socks for me. I don't think I want to just put striped socks in, but they might be. I know it's going to be socks. I'm so excited to get my needles into this. And this, I think, is superwash, which is a bit annoying, but she didn't have any non-superwash mini skeins. But it is 50% merino, 20% nylon. That can't be right. 80% merino, 20% nylon. One of the reasons that I would have preferred these to be non-superwash is because I find that non-superwash wool is much warmer on my feet. The superwash stops the fibres from coming through for me, and they don't heat my feet up in the same way, and I want warm feet. But I was willing to sacrifice for these gorgeous colours. Look at that little speckled number. I could have bought her entire stand at them very happily. I just stood watching it for a long while thinking, this is beautiful, like this is really beautifully done. So that's what I bought. Is there anything else I need to tell you? I think that might be it. We're very definitely coming into like yarn festival season now. So I have got a blog post. If you haven't been to a yarn festival or you've only been to a couple, I've got a blog post that I wrote a couple of years ago that are like the top 10 things to know about a yarn festival before you go. So I'm going to provide a link down below for that, just in case you need a bit of extra help. But it's some tips on food, kind of talking with vendors, when the busy times tend to be. And a lot of that experience is built on the fact that I used to vend at yarn shows when I had the craft shop for years and years and years, and sometimes I was doing kind of 13 shows in a year. So I've got a lot of baked in experience from vending at shows, but also I attend a lot of shows throughout a year because they really creatively top me up. So I've learned a thing or two and I've distilled it into a top 10. So if you need it, you can read that blog post on how to make the most of yarn shows. So, thank you for being with me again. It's always lovely to sit and have a brew with you. Talk toot about yarn. I can do it all day long. I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. If you can, hit the like and subscribe and send me a little note. Tell me what you're up to. What are you making? What yarn are you with? What yarn are you coveting? Right, I'm going to stop rambling now. See you in 2 weeks' time. Bye-bye. I am weaving.